the cow that died so a family could live. The morning mist clung to the terraced rice paddies like gossamer veils, wrapping the ancient village of Shengshan in a timeless embrace. In the valley where the mountain stream sang its eternal song, the Chen family woke to another day of simple rhythms, their entire existence revolving around a single brown cow tethered beneath the persimmon tree. Chen Wei rose before dawn, as he had for 30 years, his calloused hands reaching for the wooden bucket with the muscle memory of decades. His wife, Mei, stirred the fire beneath the iron pot, preparing the thin rice porridge that would sustain them until evening. Their daughter, Lion, 14 years old and bright as spring blossoms, swept the packed earth floor of their one-room dwelling with practiced strokes that required no thought. Cow, patient and placid, chewed her cud while Chen Wei's fingers worked her udders with gentle efficiency. The milk streamed into the bucket in rhythmic whispers, white gold that represented everything the family owned in this world. They sold the milk to neighbors, bartered it for vegetables, made simple cheese that Chen Wei carried to the market town 3 hours distant every fifth day. The cow was not merely livestock. She was providence, security, and the thin barrier between survival and destitution. "Blessings upon you, old mother," Chen Wei whispered to the cow as he did every morning. "We are grateful for your generosity." The family lived in what others might call poverty, but they knew nothing of want because they had never imagined abundance. Their bamboo and thatch house leaned slightly to the east, patched and repatched over generations. They owned 3 bowls, 2 blankets, 4 sets of clothes, and the milk bucket. Yet in the evening, when they sat together beneath the persimmon tree watching the sun paint the mountains copper and gold, they felt a contentment that asked no questions about what lay beyond their small circle of existence. But what Master Li saw when he and his young disciple Zhao entered Shengshan would shock even those who thought they understood the nature of compassion. The 2 monks arrived on a Tuesday, their saffron robes dusty from mountain roads, their wooden staffs clicking against stone pathways. Master Li walked with the peculiar lightness of someone who carried no burden but enlightenment itself, though his hair had whitened, and his face bore the deep lines of 70 winters. Zhao, barely 22, followed 3 paces behind as tradition demanded, his eyes bright with the earnest devotion of one who believed wisdom could be absorbed through proximity to a master. They sought shelter at the village temple, a modest structure where incense burned before a simple Buddha carved from local pine. The village headman, old Zhao, welcomed them with tea and the ritual courtesies extended to wandering monks. In these remote places, holy men brought blessings simply by their presence, and offering them hospitality accumulated merit for future lives. "Stay as long as you wish, honored masters," old Zhao said, bowing deeply. "Our humble village is graced by your footsteps." For 3 days, Master Li and Zhao moved through Shengshan like wind through leaves, present but unobtrusive. They accepted simple meals of rice and pickled vegetables, meditated in the temple courtyard, and observed the rhythms of rural life with the detached interest of clouds watching rivers flow. But Master Li watched one family with particular attention. He observed how Chen Wei's shoulders curved inward, not from age but from the permanent stoop of limited ambition. He noted how Mei's hands, capable and strong, moved with the efficiency of tasks repeated 10,000 times without variation. He saw how young Lion's eyes sometimes drifted to the mountains beyond the valley, a hunger there that she quickly suppressed, as if wanting more than milk and survival was a betrayal of filial duty. On the evening of the 3rd day, Master Li sat beneath the persimmon tree while the Chen family ate their dinner. The cow, munching grass nearby, paid him no attention. Chen Wei, uncomfortable with such proximity to holiness, invited the monk to share their meager meal. "We have little, honored master, but what we have is yours," Chen Wei said, his voice carrying the apologetic tone of someone who had spent a lifetime explaining insufficiency. Master Li accepted a bowl of rice and studied the family with eyes that seemed to see beneath skin and bone to the architecture of souls. "You are content," Master Li observed. It was not a question. "We are blessed, master," May replied, though her definition of blessing would have broken the heart of anyone who understood human potential. "The cow provides," Chen Wei added, reaching out to pat the animal's flank with a tenderness usually reserved for children. "Yes," Master Li said softly, "the cow provides." What happened next would haunt Xiao's dreams for years and challenge everything he believed about the nature of mercy. That night when the village slept and even the dogs had ceased their vigilant barking, Master Li rose from his meditation mat. Xiao, who slept lightly as young monks do, heard his master's footsteps crossing the temple courtyard. Something in the deliberate quality of those steps made Xiao rise and follow, keeping to shadows, his heart beginning to pound with a premonition he could not name. Master Li moved through the village like a ghost, his white hair gleaming in the moonlight. He carried no lamp, needed no light, his feet finding the path to the Chen house with certainty. Xiao watched from behind a mulberry tree as his master approached the persimmon tree where the cow slept standing, as cows do, her breathing deep and regular. Master Li placed his hand on the cow's neck. For a moment, Xiao thought his master was offering a blessing. Then Master Li's fingers found a specific point below the jaw, pressed with the precision of someone who understood the body's hidden architecture, and the cow's legs buckled. She fell without a sound, her massive body hitting the earth with a muffled thump that Xiao felt in his chest like a second heartbeat. The cow did not rise. Xiao's mouth opened in a silent scream. His hands gripped the mulberry tree until splinters pierced his palms. He watched Master Li stand over the fallen animal for a long moment, his hand resting on her still flank, his lips moving in what might have been prayer or apology or something beyond Xiao's understanding. Then Master Li turned and walked back toward the temple, his face serene as mountain snow. Xiao stumbled from his hiding place, his mind fragmenting into 1,000 sharp pieces. He ran to the cow, pressed his ear to her chest, searching desperately for a heartbeat. But the flesh beneath his cheek was already cooling, the spirit already fled. His hands shook as he touched the cow's open eye, seeing his own horrified reflection in the glazing surface. When Xiao burst into the temple, Master Li was seated in meditation posture, his breathing calm and even. "Master," Xiao's voice cracked, tears streaming down his young face. "Master, what have you done? The Chen family, they have nothing. That cow was their entire life. How could you?" He choked on words too large for his throat. Master Li opened his eyes. In them, Xiao saw neither guilt nor satisfaction, only a clarity that was somehow more terrible than cruelty. "Pack your things," Master Li said quietly. "We leave before dawn." "Leave? Master, we cannot simply leave. We must replace the cow, we must. We must do nothing but continue our journey. What I have done is done. What happens next is not our concern." "Not our concern." Xiao's voice rose to a pitch that would have horrified him in any other circumstance. "Master, they will starve. The daughter lion, she's just a child. How is destroying their only means of survival not our concern?" Master Li rose with the fluid grace of bamboo straightening after a storm. He placed his hand on Xiao's shoulder, and the young monk felt something pass between them, a current of knowledge too vast and terrible to comprehend. "Sometimes the cruelest act of compassion is to kill the thing someone loves," Master Li said. "Sometimes the only way to save a drowning person is to stop throwing them ropes to cling to." The words made no sense. Xiao's entire training, every sutra he had memorized, every teaching about compassion and non-harm, rose up in rebellion against this action. Yet Master Li was his teacher, his guide, the man he had followed for 3 years believing him to be enlightened. Before dawn, while mist still cloaked the valley and the Chen family slept in innocent ignorance of the catastrophe waiting beneath the persimmon tree, the 2 monks walked out of Shengshan. Xiao kept looking back, each glance a wordless plea for his master to reconsider, to return, to make right this terrible wrong. But Master Li walked forward without hesitation, and Zio, trained in obedience if not understanding, followed. The secret reason behind the cow's sacrifice was more profound than anyone imagined, but it would take years of suffering before the truth revealed itself. Chen Wei's wail of discovery split the morning like an axe through kindling. Neighbors came running, drawn by the sound of a man whose entire world had collapsed between one breath and the next. They found him on his knees beside the cow, his hands clutching at his hair, his wife May standing frozen with a hand pressed to her mouth, and young Lion sobbing into her mother's side. "Dead," Chen Wei kept repeating. "She's dead, she's dead, she's dead." The village gathered around this tableau of grief, as if witnessing the death of hope itself. Old Zhao examined the cow, searching for signs of illness or injury, but found only a mysterious peace in the animal's expression, as if she had simply decided to stop living. "Perhaps she ate something poisonous," someone suggested. "Maybe it was her time," another offered, though the cow had been young and healthy the day before. No one suspected the monks. Holy men brought blessings, not curses. The coincidence of their departure and the cow's death went unexamined because people see what their beliefs allow them to see. The village took up a collection for the Chen family. A few coins, some rice, pickled vegetables, charity measured in the currency of shared poverty. It would sustain them for perhaps 2 weeks if stretched thin enough. "What will we do?" May asked that night, her voice hollow as a cracked bowl. Chen Wei sat with his head in his hands, unable to answer because he had never developed the capacity to imagine solutions beyond the scope of that dead cow's provisions. Lion, 14 years old and watching her parents disintegrate, felt something strange kindling in her chest. It was not quite anger and not quite fear, but something harder and brighter, a determination born from watching helplessness devour the people she loved. "We'll find another way," Lion said, though she had no idea what that way might be. Her parents looked at her with the sad, patient expressions of adults who have learned that hope is just another word for delayed disappointment. But Lion remembered how her eyes had drifted to those mountains, how something in her had always whispered that she was capable of more than sweeping floors and accepting limitation. The cow's death, though she could not yet articulate it, had severed the chain that kept her circling the same small patch of earth. While the Chen family faced their crisis with paralysis and grief, Zio wrestled with a decision that would test everything he believed about compassion, redemption, and the price of making things right. For 2 weeks after leaving Shengshan, Zio barely spoke to Master Li. They walked through mountains and valleys, stayed in temples and slept beneath stars, and the silence between them grew thick as stone. Master Li seemed untroubled by his disciples' anguish, which only deepened Zio's torment. Finally, at a crossroads where the path split toward the coast and the capital, Zio stopped walking. "I cannot continue with you, Master," he said, his voice steady though his hands trembled. "What you did to that family, I cannot accept it. I cannot be your student if this is what wisdom looks like." Master Li regarded him with those clear, penetrating eyes. "You are free to choose your path, Zio. You have always been free." "I'm going back," Zio said, the decision crystallizing even as he spoke it. "I'm going to work, save money, and buy the Chen family a new cow. I'm going to fix what you destroyed." Something flickered across Master Li's face. Was it approval, sadness, amusement? "As you wish," Master Li said simply. "But Zio, remember this moment. Remember what you believe compassion requires of you." Then the old master walked down the path toward the capital, and Zio turned toward the coast, his heart heavy with righteous purpose. The coastal city of Lanzhou sprawled beside the sea like a living organism of wood and stone, its streets clogged with merchants, laborers, sailors, and the complex machinery of commerce. Zio, who had spent his life in rural temples and mountain monasteries, felt overwhelmed by the noise and chaos, but his determination burned brighter than his fear. He found work at the docks, loading and unloading ships that came from distant lands with holds full of silk, tea, spices, and timber. The labor was brutal, nothing like the measured contemplation of monastery life. His hands developed calluses on top of calluses. His back ached until pain became a permanent companion. But every evening he counted his meager wages and calculated how many more days until he had enough to purchase a quality dairy cow. A good cow cost more than he had imagined. The amount seemed impossible. A mountain too steep to climb. But Zio added a second job cleaning a merchant's warehouse after dark, then a third helping a tea seller before dawn. He slept 4 hours a night, ate the cheapest rice, wore his robes until they were more patch than fabric. The merchants found him strange, a monk living among laborers, working himself to exhaustion for a goal he never explained. But his honesty and diligence earned respect. The tea seller, a widow named Auntie Feng, adopted him as a kind of surrogate son, slipping him extra dumplings when she thought he wasn't looking. "Why do you work yourself to death, young monk?" she asked one morning, watching him count coins with the focused intensity of prayer. "I owe a debt," Zio replied. "To whom?" "To a family I wronged, or my master wronged. Or perhaps I wrong them now by trying to fix what should not be fixed. I no longer know, Auntie. I only know I must try." What the Chen family discovered in their desperation would change their destiny forever and challenge every assumption their village held about poverty, capability, and the nature of human potential. The first month after the cow died, the Chen family survived on village charity and the rapidly diminishing rice in their storage jar. Chen Wei spent his days sitting beneath the persimmon tree, staring at the empty space where the cow had lived, as if sufficient longing could resurrect her from the earth. Mei rationed their food with mathematical precision, but mathematics cannot multiply nothing into something, and the jar's bottom approached with the inevitability of seasons. It was Lion who moved first. She walked to the village headman's house and asked if there was work she could do. Old Zhao, moved by her determination if not optimistic about her prospects, sent her to the widow Chen, who needed help with laundry. The work was hard, hauling water from the stream, scrubbing clothes against rocks until her knuckles bled, hanging everything to dry in the mountain wind. The widow paid her in vegetables and occasionally a few coins. It was not enough, not nearly enough. But Lion noticed something while washing clothes. The wealthy merchant's wife from the next village paid premium prices for laundry done exceptionally well. An idea, small as a seed, planted itself in Lion's mind. She began experimenting. She asked the widow about soap making, learned which mountain herbs could brighten white fabric, discovered that certain spring water left clothes softer than river water. She worked with the focus of someone who understood that excellence was not optional but essential for survival. Within 3 months, Lion's laundering skills became known beyond Shengshan. Women from neighboring villages began bringing their finest garments to the Chen house, willing to pay more for Lion's superior work. Mei, watching her daughter transform necessity into enterprise, felt something long dormant stir within her. Mei began making soap to sell alongside Lion's laundry services. She experimented with jasmine, lotus, and mountain herbs, creating fragrances that made washing clothes a sensory pleasure rather than a chore. Her soaps developed a reputation for quality and artistry. Chen Wei, witnessing his wife and daughter's transformation, felt shame kindle into something more useful, motivation. He had spent 30 years depending on a cow, but he had working hands and a mountain full of bamboo. He taught himself basket weaving from an old villager, spending night after night learning to weave tight, beautiful patterns. His first attempts were laughably bad, but he persisted with the desperate focus of someone who had finally realized that survival demanded creation, not just maintenance. By the end of the first year, the Chen family had transformed from milk-dependent peasants into a multifaceted enterprise. Lion ran a premium laundry service. Mei sold soaps and herbal products. Chen Wei's baskets appeared in markets 3 villages away, prized for their durability and beauty. They earned more in 1 month than the cow had provided in 3. But the transformation went deeper than economics. Chen Wei stood straighter. Mei smiled more frequently. Lion, who had once swept floors with mindless repetition, now moved through the world with the confidence of someone who had discovered her own competence. Old Zhao watched this metamorphosis with fascination bordering on disbelief. In village meetings, he cited the Chen family as proof that poverty was often a failure of imagination rather than resources. "Look at what they've built from nothing," he said. "All this potential was always there, trapped beneath the comfortable prison of that single cow." Other families, watching the Chen's success, began examining their own limitations. The village blacksmith's son, who had never considered any path but following his father's trade, opened a small school teaching children to read. The tofu maker's daughter started a service delivering products to elderly villagers who could no longer walk to the market. Shengshan was changing, its economic and spiritual landscape reshaping around the catalyst of one family's forced transformation. But no one in the village knew the truth about how this revolution had begun. No one suspected that an act of deliberate destruction had been the spark that ignited their collective awakening. That's when Master Li's secret actions would reveal the difference between destructive cruelty and transformative compassion. While Xiao labored in Lanzhou counting coins toward his redemption, Master Li had not traveled far. The old monk had circled back to the mountains above Shengshan, taking residence in a cave hermitage used by meditation masters seeking isolation and clarity. From this vantage point, Master Li could see the village spread below like a living map. He watched the Chen family's transformation with the patient attention of a gardener observing planted seeds. But he did more than watch. On moonless nights, Master Li descended from his cave and moved through Shengshan like a beneficial ghost. He left bundles of mountain herbs on the Chen's doorstep, herbs that Mei would discover made exceptional soap. He arranged for a traveling merchant to accidentally stop at the Chen house and be so impressed with Lion's laundering that he spread word to 3 neighboring villages. When Chen Wei's first basket-weaving attempts fell apart in his frustrated hands, Master Li left a perfectly woven sample beneath the persimmon tree, unsigned and unexplained, a silent demonstration of technique. He guided without being seen, taught without speaking, orchestrated their success while ensuring they believed it entirely their own. Because that was the crucial element. The Chen family had to discover their capabilities themselves. If Master Li had simply given them money or a new cow, they would have remained dependent, grateful but unchanged. But by destroying their security and then subtly clearing obstacles from their path, he forced them to excavate their own buried potential. A young monk from the village temple, curious about the hermit in the mountain cave, sometimes brought Master Li simple meals. During these brief visits, the young monk mentioned village happenings, the Chen family's remarkable transformation, the ripple effects spreading through Shengshan's economy, the way other families had begun questioning their own limitations. Master Li listened, with the satisfaction of an artist watching his masterpiece slowly reveal itself to the world. "The old man Chen," the young monk said one evening, "he tells everyone that desperation showed him he had been living half a life. He says the cow's death was the greatest blessing the heavens ever provided, though he wept for a month when it happened." Master Li smiled his inscrutable smile and said nothing. Meanwhile in Lanzhou, Xiao finally counted the last coin needed to purchase a quality dairy cow. It had taken 2 years of brutal labor, but his calloused hands held the sum required. His heart swelled with righteous satisfaction. He would return to Shengshan, present the cow to the Chen family, and finally sleep without guilt gnawing at his conscience. He purchased a strong young cow from a reputable dealer, obtained the papers proving ownership, and began the 3-week journey back to Shengshan. The cow, docile and healthy, walked beside him with the patient plodding of her kind. During those weeks on the road, Xiao imagined the joyous reunion, the Chen family's tears of gratitude, their relief at having their livelihood restored, his own redemption complete. The fantasy sustained him through rain and difficult mountain passages. But what Xiao found when he finally walked into Shengshan would shatter his assumptions and rebuild his understanding of everything his master had tried to teach him. The village looked different, prosperous. New roofs gleamed on several houses. The temple had been expanded. The market square bustled with an energy that hadn't existed 2 years before. Xiao, tired from travel and focused on his mission, barely noticed these changes. He asked directions to the Chen house and received curious looks. The Chens, you mean the family with the laundry and soap business, the ones with the basket workshop. Yes, up the hill, the large house beneath the persimmon tree. Large house. Xiao's steps quickened, confusion mixing with his anticipation. The structure beneath the persimmon tree had indeed expanded. A new room added to the side, the thatched roof replaced with sturdy tiles, a covered workspace where bamboo strips lay soaking for Chen Wei's basket weaving. Clothes hung on lines stretching between trees, brilliant white in the afternoon sun. The air smelled of jasmine and lye soap. Lion, now 16 and carrying herself with remarkable poise, was folding laundry when she saw Xiao approaching with the cow. Her face showed polite curiosity but no recognition. She had barely noticed the monks 2 years before, too absorbed in her own limited world. "May I help you, Sir Monk?" she asked. Xiao stood frozen, his carefully rehearsed speech evaporating. I've brought a cow for your family, to replace the one that died." Lion's expression shifted through confusion to understanding to something that might have been pity. "Please wait," she said gently. "I'll fetch my parents." Chen Wei emerged from the workshop, his hands stained with bamboo dye, his posture that of a man comfortable in his own competence. Mei followed, wiping soap from her hands, her face carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had discovered unsuspected strengths. They stared at the cow, then at Xiao, then back at the cow. "Forgive me," Xiao said, words tumbling out in a rush. "2 years ago my master and I stayed in your village. My master, he killed your cow. I don't expect you to understand why. I don't understand myself, but I've worked every day since then to earn money to replace what he destroyed. Please accept this cow. Let me make this right." The silence that followed seemed to stretch across centuries. Chen Wei's face worked through several expressions before settling on something between amazement and compassion. He began to laugh, not cruel mockery, but the deep, cleansing laughter of someone recognizing cosmic irony. "Young monk," Chen Wei finally said, "you've worked 2 years to buy us a cow we don't need and wouldn't want if we did." Xiao's world tilted. "I don't understand." Mei stepped forward, her voice kind but firm. "When our cow died, we thought our lives had ended. For a month, I wished to die myself rather than face such destitution. But then Lion started washing clothes, and I made soap, and my husband discovered he could weave baskets. We discovered we could create value instead of just depending on an animal. We earn more in a week now than that cow provided in a month," Chen Wei added. "We employ 2 assistants. We've helped 3 other families start similar businesses. The cow dying was the greatest gift we ever received, though it took us months to realize it." Lion touched the cow's neck gently. "She's beautiful and your gesture is generous. But Sir Monk, if you gave us this cow now, you would trap us back in the comfortable prison we escaped. You would undo our transformation." The revelation hit Xiao like a physical blow. His legs felt weak. 2 years of labor, 2 years of guilt and determination, 2 years of believing he was working toward redemption. All of it suddenly revealed as a fundamental misunderstanding of what the Chen family had actually needed. Then my master, Zio, could barely form words. He didn't destroy your lives, he saved them. Saved us from ourselves, May said softly, from our own comfortable stagnation, from a poverty that was more mindset than circumstance. Chen Wei gestured to the expanded house, the thriving business, the daughter who stood tall and capable. Ask yourself, young monk, what would we be if that cow had lived? Still sitting beneath this tree, selling milk, never discovering what we were capable of becoming. The ground seemed to shift beneath Zio's feet. Every certainty he had built over 2 years crumbled, but something more solid and true was emerging from the rubble. I need to find my master, Zio whispered. Old Zhao, who had approached during the conversation, nodded toward the mountain. There's a hermit in the cave on the eastern peak, white-haired old monk. Been there about 2 years. Some say he watches over our village like a guardian spirit. Zio looked up at the mountain, and suddenly he understood. His master had never left, had never abandoned the consequences of his action, had been here all along, guiding from the shadows, ensuring the transformation he forced into being could fully blossom. But what happened when master and student finally confronted each other would complete Zio's education in the true nature of compassion, and the courage required to love someone enough to hurt them. Zio left the cow with a farmer who agreed to care for it until he decided what to do with the animal. Then he climbed the mountain path toward the cave, his mind reeling with revelations that rewrote everything he thought he knew about wisdom, compassion, and the price of real transformation. The cave sat in a cleft of rock where mountain springs provided water, and the view stretched across 3 valleys. Master Li sat in meditation posture before the cave entrance, his white hair gleaming in the late afternoon sun. He opened his eyes as Zio approached, and there was no surprise in his expression, only patient welcome, as if he had been waiting for this moment for exactly 2 years. Master, Zio said, and found himself unable to continue, emotion closing his throat. Sit, Zio, Master Li said gently. Zio sat on the stone outcropping, looking out over the valleys where the village of Shengshan nestled like a jewel in the mountain's palm. The weight of 2 years, of labor, guilt, determination, and now comprehension, pressed on his chest. You stayed, Zio finally said. You've been here the whole time watching over them. I stayed because there is a difference between destruction and transformation, Master Li said. To merely destroy would be cruelty. To destroy with purpose, then guide the reconstruction while remaining unseen, that is the art of tough love. But how could you know? Zio asked. How could you be certain they would survive, that they wouldn't starve or be broken by desperation? Master Li gestured toward the village below. I watched them for 3 days before acting. I saw Lion's eyes drift to the mountains with hunger for something larger. I saw May's capable hands moving in patterns of mindless repetition. I saw Chen Wei's posture, bent by decades of limited thinking. They had potential folded up inside them like silk in a cocoon. The cow was not their livelihood, it was their prison. Warden. But the risk is inherent in all transformation, Master Li interrupted gently. Yes, there was risk. There is always risk in forcing someone out of their comfort zone. But Zio, look at what has happened. Not just to the Chen family, but to the whole village. Their transformation inspired others. Shengshan is more prosperous now than it has been in generations, and it all began with one dead cow. Zio felt tears streaming down his face, not from sadness but from the overwhelming weight of understanding. And I spent 2 years trying to undo your work, trying to put them back in their prison because I thought that was compassion. Your response was natural, even admirable in its way, Master Li said. You saw suffering and wanted to alleviate it immediately. That is the instinct of a kind heart. But Zio, there are 2 types of compassion in this world. The first sees someone drowning and throws them a rope. The second teaches them to swim by forcing them into water deeper than they've ever known. How do you know which compassion to offer? You observe carefully. You assess potential. You understand that sometimes the kindest thing you can do is refuse to save someone from their own growth. Master Li paused, his gaze distant. The Chen family was drowning in comfort, suffocating in a life too small for their spirits. They needed the current to shift dramatically enough to force them to swim. Zio wiped his eyes. I thought you were cruel. I thought you had betrayed everything Buddhism teaches about non-harm. And what harm did I do ultimately? Master Li asked. I killed a cow, a single animal whose life had natural limits. But in doing so, I gave life to 3 human spirits that had been dying slowly in the cage of their own limitations. Which is the greater compassion, Zio? To preserve false comfort or to catalyze genuine transformation? The question hung in the mountain air like incense smoke. The Chen family, Zio said slowly. They called the cow's death the greatest gift they ever received. Because it was, Master Li confirmed. But it could only be a gift because it forced them to discover their own strength. If I had given them money, or a new cow, or anything that allowed them to continue as they were, I would have robbed them of the necessity that drives all innovation and growth. Zio looked at his calloused hands, marked by 2 years of brutal labor. And my 2 years of work to buy them a replacement cow, was that entirely wasted? Master Li smiled, a complex expression carrying both sadness and approval. Not wasted, Zio. You learned something essential about the nature of help and harm. You learned that good intentions can sometimes enable the very stagnation we wish to cure. And you learned it through direct experience, which is the only teaching that truly transforms. But what do I do with the cow I bought? Zio asked, almost laughing at the absurdity. Perhaps give it to a family that actually needs one, Master Li suggested. Or sell it and donate the money to the village temple. Or keep it as a very expensive reminder that the most obvious solution is not always the most compassionate one. They sat in silence for a while, master and disciple, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of copper and gold. The village below began lighting evening lamps, small stars reflecting the sky's grandeur. Master, Zio said finally, when you placed your hand on that cow's neck and stopped its heart, were you afraid you were wrong? Master Li was quiet for a long moment before answering. Every act of true compassion requires courage because we can never be entirely certain of the outcome. Yes, I was afraid. I have lived many years and observed much, but humans are not mathematics. The Chen family might have broken instead of transforming. The village might have turned bitter instead of inspired. But Zio, the greater fear was watching 3 lives being slowly suffocated by comfort and doing nothing. And if they had broken, then I would have been there to help them rebuild, just as I stayed to guide their transformation. But I had to believe, that human spirit, when properly challenged, will reach for excellence rather than accept destruction. Zio felt something shift inside him, like a door opening onto a landscape he had never imagined. This is what you've been trying to teach me all along, isn't it? That wisdom sometimes requires actions that appear cruel to those who cannot see the larger pattern. Wisdom, Master Li said, requires understanding that there are many ways to love someone, and the truest love often refuses to enable comfortable suffering. The Chen family was suffering before that cow died, suffering the slow death of unexplored potential, of lives lived half asleep. Their suffering after the cow's death was acute and terrible, but it was the kind of suffering that purifies and transforms rather than diminishes. Like fire burning away impurities from gold, Zio murmured, remembering an old teaching. Exactly so. But Zio, never forget that wielding this kind of compassion requires tremendous wisdom and equally tremendous humility. I could have been wrong. The difference between transformative compassion and simple cruelty is often measured in the giver's motivation and the care taken to observe and guide afterward. That's when the deepest lesson revealed itself, the paradox that would reshape Zio's entire understanding of what it meant to be truly compassionate. As darkness settled over the mountains and the first stars appeared like promises in the deepening blue, Zio understood that his entire 2-year journey had been necessary, not to replace the cow, but to transform his own understanding of what helping truly meant. "Master," he said, "I need to return to the village tomorrow and apologize to the Chen family for trying to undo their growth." "Why?" Master Li asked simply. The question stopped Zio mid-thought. Because I tried to." "You tried to give them a gift according to your understanding of compassion," Master Li interrupted. "There is no shame in that and no apology required. Your journey to buy that cow was your own growth path, Zio. You needed to walk every step of it to arrive at this moment of understanding. But surely they deserve to know the truth, that you killed the cow deliberately, that you stayed to guide them, that." "Do they?" Master Li's question carried no judgment, only genuine curiosity. What would that knowledge add to their transformation? They have already arrived at the most important truth, that the cow's death catalyzed their awakening. Whether it was accident or intention matters less than what they built from that foundation. Zio considered this carefully. "You're saying the truth of their transformation matters more than the truth of how it began." "I'm saying that different truths serve different purposes. The Chen family needed to believe they rescued themselves, because in the deepest sense they did. I only removed the obstacle that prevented them from trying. The courage, the creativity, the persistence that built their new life, all of that came from within them. My role was to create the conditions where their potential could no longer hide." "But the village sees you as a guardian spirit now," Zio said. "Old Zhao mentioned it. People bring you food, speak of the hermit who watches over Shengshan. They feel your presence even if they don't understand it." "And that serves a purpose too," Master Li acknowledged. "The village is healthier for believing in forces that support their growth. But Zio, the moment they know the specific details of my intervention, I become an actor in their story rather than a mirror reflecting their own capabilities." Understanding bloomed in Zio's mind like lotus flowers opening to the sun. "You're teaching me about the ego of helping, aren't you? About how helpers can become attached to recognition, to being seen as the catalyst, the savior, the wise one who fixed everything." Master Li's smile was gentle but approving. "The hardest part of transformative compassion is remaining invisible afterward. The ego wants credit. It wants gratitude. It wants to be acknowledged as the architect of someone else's transformation. But the purest compassion plants seeds and disappears, allowing the garden to believe it grew itself." Even though that's not entirely true. "Even though that's not entirely true," Master Li confirmed. "Because the transformation must belong to those who lived it, not to those who catalyzed it. The Chen family will tell their grandchildren that they overcame impossible odds through their own determination and creativity. That story will inspire generations. But if they know an enlightened master orchestrated their crisis and guided their response, the story becomes about the master's wisdom rather than their own resilience." Zio sat with this teaching, feeling it reshape his understanding of help, harm, and the space between. So the most compassionate act can be to create a crisis, guide from shadows, then disappear without ever being acknowledged for either the destruction or the support. "Now you begin to understand," Master Li said softly. "This is the art of loving someone enough to hurt them, then loving them enough to let them claim their healing as entirely their own." They meditated together as stars filled the sky and night settled over the mountains like a blessing. In that silence, Zio felt something ancient and true settling into his bones, the wisdom that comes not from books or lectures, but from witnessing love expressed through actions that look like their opposite. When dawn came, painting the mountains rose and gold, Zio made his decision about the cow. He returned to the village and approached a family he had noticed on his arrival, a young couple struggling with 2 small children, their faces carrying the pinched look of people whose resources never quite matched their needs. They had no cow, no particular business, but something in the wife's eyes reminded Zio of how Lion's eyes used to drift toward the mountains with unspoken hunger. I have a cow, Zio told them. Strong, healthy, good milk production. I bought her for another purpose, but I believe she belongs with your family. The husband and wife stared at him with the disbelief of people unaccustomed to gifts. We could never afford, the husband began. No payment, Zio interrupted. Consider it a blessing from the Buddha. May she serve you well. He transferred ownership and walked away before they could overwhelm him with gratitude. As he left, he wondered if he had just done the same thing to this family that Master Li had worked so hard to help the Chens escape, providing easy security that might prevent them from discovering their own potential. But perhaps, he reflected, not every family needed the same catalyst. Perhaps some needed support and others needed crisis, and wisdom lay in understanding which was which. He returned to the cave where Master Li waited. I gave the cow to another family, Zio reported. Perhaps I shouldn't have. Perhaps I've trapped them in the same comfort that imprisoned the Chens. Or perhaps you've given them the foundation they needed to build something larger, Master Li replied. Not everyone needs their security destroyed, Zio. Some people need a hand up before they can climb. The art is in observation, understanding which intervention serves genuine growth and which merely satisfies our own need to feel helpful. How do I develop that understanding? Through years of careful observation, through mistakes that humble you, and through the willingness to act even when uncertainty makes your hands shake. Master Li stood, gathering his simple belongings. Come, Zio, it's time we continued our journey. Where are we going? Wherever the path leads, Master Li said with a slight smile. But we'll walk it together, and along the way, I'll teach you to see beneath surface suffering to the deeper patterns that actually need transformation. As they walked down the mountain path away from Shengshan, Zio looked back one final time at the village spread below. The Chen house gleamed with its new roof. Laundry fluttered like prayer flags. A thin stream of smoke rose from Chen Wei's workshop. Master, Zio said as they walked, will we ever tell them the truth about that night? Perhaps one day, when they're old and the story needs a final chapter, Master Li replied. Or perhaps the truth will die with me, and the Chen family will live their whole lives believing they saved themselves. Which outcome serves the greater good, do you think? Zio considered carefully. The second one, let them own their transformation completely. Now you truly begin to understand, Master Li said. They walked in companionable silence for a while before Zio asked the question that had been forming in his heart since the previous evening. Master, if you could go back to that night, knowing the risk, knowing the uncertainty, knowing the weight of deliberately destroying someone's security, would you still kill the cow? Master Li didn't hesitate. Without question. Because Zio, the alternative was watching three souls spend their entire lives in a cage of their own making, never knowing what they were capable of becoming. That is the crueler fate, though it wears the disguise of safety and comfort. And if they had broken instead of transformed, then I would have been there to help them rebuild, just as I was there to guide their transformation. The point is not to destroy and abandon, but to destroy with purpose and remain present for the growth that follows, even if that presence must be invisible. They continued down the mountain path. Two monks in saffron robes carrying nothing but their begging bowls, and the accumulated wisdom of lessons, learned through action and observation. Behind them, Shengshan continued its transformation, each family influenced by the Chen's example beginning to question their own limitations and explore their dormant potential. The village was becoming a beacon of prosperity in the region, and it all traced back to one dead cow beneath a persimmon tree. But the Chen family, busy with their thriving businesses and the constant adaptation required by success, never knew that an old monk had watched over their transformation from a mountain cave. They never knew that the herbs that appeared on their doorstep had been deliberate gifts, that the traveling merchant who spread word of Lion's laundry skills had been subtly directed their way, that the basket-weaving sample that taught Chen Wei proper technique had been placed with loving precision. They believed, as Master Li intended, that they had lifted themselves through their own determination and creativity. And in the deepest sense, they had, because potential means nothing until it's claimed through action and courage. Years later, when Lion married a teacher from a neighboring province, and Chen Wei's baskets sold in markets 3 days' journey away, and Mei's soaps graced the homes of wealthy merchants, the family would gather beneath the persimmon tree and tell stories of their transformation. "Remember when the cow died?" Chen Wei would say, his voice carrying the satisfaction of someone who had transcended his own limitations. "I thought the world had ended, but actually it was the day our real lives began." "The best thing that ever happened to us," Mei would agree, her hands still strong and capable at 60, still making soap that bore her reputation across the region. And Lion, teaching her own children the lessons learned through her family's transformation, would say, "Sometimes the greatest blessings wear the disguise of disasters. Sometimes you have to lose everything to discover what you're actually capable of creating." The story of the Chen family's transformation spread throughout the region, becoming a parable about the dangers of comfort zones and the potential hidden in every human spirit. Other families facing crises would remember the Chens and find courage to transform rather than merely survive. But none of them knew about the old monk, who had catalyzed it all with one deliberate, compassionate, terrible act of destruction. And Master Li and Xiao walked the roads of the world, observing, learning, occasionally intervening in ways that looked like cruelty, but served as catalysts for transformation. Xiao learned to see beneath surface suffering to the deeper patterns, to distinguish between help that empowers and help that enables, to understand that sometimes the kindest act is to destroy what someone clings to so they might discover what they're capable of creating. The lesson lived in Xiao's heart for the rest of his days, that true compassion often requires the courage to hurt someone in the short term to serve their growth in the long term. That comfort can be a prison more secure than iron bars. That necessity is indeed the mother of innovation, and sometimes you have to create the necessity before innovation can be born. And somewhere in the mountains of that timeless land, the lesson continued echoing. The cow had to die so the family could live. Not just survive, but truly live, awaken to their own potential, transformed by forced discomfort into the fullest expression of what they had always been capable of becoming. This was the wisdom Master Li carried and taught, that loving someone sometimes means refusing to save them from the very challenges that could transform them, that the deepest compassion understands the difference between rescuing and empowering, that sometimes you must break what someone depends on to force them to discover they never needed it in the first place. The cow died, the family lived, the village transformed, and 2 monks walked the mountain roads, carrying the secret of what true compassion sometimes requires, the courage to destroy what limits someone, then the humility to disappear before they can thank you for the pain that saved their lives.